Marc Daniel Seiffert is an economist. He works for Framespa Laboratory at Toulouse University. Today, he gives his hypothesis about how airlines and aircraft manufacturers will react to the COVID-19 crisis.
We'll try to answer as clearly as possible the very difficult question this issue is: the effect of the pandemic on aeronautical activities all over the world. We need very great caution because this crisis is completely new and cannot extrapolate from previous crises. Actually, this crisis is due to an external factor, a pandemic, whose specialists don't yet really know the origin, its propagation mode, its lethality, even less the remedies, which make forecasting very difficult for the future of our internal activities. Two characteristics of the crisis are to be emphasized. It's a double global crisis because it affects all the countries and all activities, and especially it's very different from previous crises, one not so global. We need also to remember that it was not a gradual slowdown, but the economy was suddenly halted, suddenly stopped. Therefore, we propose a very single methodological approach on an end dynamic from the past to the future, to the present and the future. On the other hand, a sectoral study from the downstream to the upstream, that's to say, the consumer, the airlines, the infrastructure, airports, and air traffic control, and to finish, the aeronautics industry. We'll focus on airlines and industry. On the methodological principle, we remember that we have to be very, very prudent because we know very little about the future. We have a lot of cognitive bias, a lot of news reveal to be not exact. So we have to be very, very prudent. What was the situation before the pandemic, and where was the outlooks were very, very optimistic. The sector was under stress due to the prospects of very strong growth in demands, around 4.5 per year, and maybe more. There was a situation with pressure on airlines, pressure on the industry, pressure on the structure, airports, air traffic control. Pressure on the airlines, because you see on this chart, we saw the figure, and there is an exponential growth from the 1950 to the 2014 and 2020. So it was also expected to become stronger this growth. And for the airlines, there was really a big problems. They have to buy a lot of planes, modernize also with a new planes to recruit and to respect the environmental regulation. For the industry, it was also the same thing, because they need capacity investment and also to recruit specialized labor forces. And for the airport, there were also insufficient airports and air traffic control have to be modernized, and they needed investment. The traffic growth was not equal in all the world. You see on this map that in the new market like Asia and also Middle East, the growth was expected to be more than 5%, maybe 6% per year. And for the mature market like North America and Western Europe, only around 3%. So it's the reason why the Asian company and the Middle East company were every day more and more under pressure. We saw here very important chart with a curve, which shows there is a correlation between the GDP growth and the passenger traffic growth with indicator PAX growth. And we saw that when the GDP growth is around 200%, the PAX growth is 4%. And you see on the green histogram compared to the gray histogram is 2 times more. But when there is a collapse, it's the same thing, minus 2% GDP growth at 4% PAX growth. No growth decrease. We think that, in fact, the income of a lot of companies and also the profit were very low. We see that Air France, for instance, are often in the red, no profit losses. Before the crisis, it was a little better, but we see it will not be so good after this crisis. To summarize, we say that airlines, global, was a very fragile sector. For airlines, profitability generally low, like Air France, insufficient cash flow, but we see great disparity. It should explain the future after the pandemic, according to the situation of the company. For industry, we see that it was always a very capital-intensive industry, which needs very heavy investment, that this industry need very high research and development expenses, and these expenses of innovation are no exposure to technological and commercial uncertainty. We never know if a new plane will be technically good and also commercially good. So it's uncertainty. And fourth point, very important, industry is characterized by a very complex supply chain from the airplane manufacturer to the subcontractors and the engine motors manufacturers and so on. And so for the sector before the pandemic, we see that it's very heterogeneous sector with, we see segmentation of the companies, well, very different, also a very hierarchical industry. Also, we have to remind that this industry is a paradoxical industry. One hand, it's activity of sovereignty because each country need to have its own airlines. Also, industry, because it's connected to defense and it's high technology. But in other hand, it's globalized. The market are globalized. Also, the production, the supply chain is all over the world. It's a paradox. What's the situation with the crisis, health crisis? First, there was a very, very drastic drop in air traffic. We see no traffic in a lot of lines. The production stopped, not entirely, but very few production went on. And also, the consequence, there was partial unemployment, for instance, in France, or full unemployment, for instance, in the United States. And the consequence, also very high, very big financial losses. We see that before we saw that we have not to compare with the previous crisis. There is some on this chart, some curves, and we see here the SARS curves 20 years ago, and it's a V curve. It says that we see that the production, and also the airline production, the airline traffic recover its level after only 1 year, no more. And for the other crisis, very, very, very few losses. And we see that on this crisis, how much was the cancellation, very, very, very many flight cancellation, 2 million until June, and it will be greater. And in fact, lost revenue, that it will be bigger than 252 billion. It was less 44, maybe it will be more. What will be the sector after the health crisis? In a very short term, there will be a latency for the restart of the very complex of globalized logistics system. It's very difficult to work again. And also we see there will be regulatory, the opening of borders, health concept, will we make the sector completely different than before. Here we see that the cargo traffic does not change very much, but in fact, it is a very small part of the airlines. A lot of freights are on passengers lines, and you see that national and low cost and international also it's more was completely stopped in April, in May, and the question is when it will be again at a better level. We spoke about heterogeneity of the airline. It's very important to see the future. For instance, Ryanair has a lot of liquidity, lot of cash. So about 6 months, there are no problem. But at the opposite, to see airlines like Lufthansa or Air France, there are very few cash. That's the reason why the situation after the crisis will be very different. What can be expected about the airlines? You see, some companies were already fragile. Some will be bankrupt, they will disappear. For the national sovereignty airline, they will get subsidized quality, maybe some will be nationalized. And for the stronger airlines like Ryanair, they will purchase flight rights, there will redemption of aircraft sold off, like 20 years ago, Ryanair did after the 201 September. But we can see that the consequence will be concentration, airline concentration, absorption, merger movement, and also bankrupt. It will be like the crisis since 200 years when the capitalism began. After crisis, there is concentration. It's expected. For the companies will be not bankrupt, there will be a problem. Human resources, no more recruitment, less training, the fleet will be decreased, and the problem what kind of planes, and orders will be cancelled. And in fact, it will be a consequence on the industry. In short term, I would say they have to restart global logistic chains, and it will be not the same for all the actors of the industry. In fact, the large group of manufacturers, Boeing, Airbus, system manufacturers, engine manufacturer, oligopolistic system, will be in stronger situations that a lot of subcontractors. Some subcontractors will disappear. And the big problem is about orders book. They will be reduced, but why? What kind of planes will be not bought by the companies, and also the discussion between the companies who have to pay penalties and manufacturers, it's a big problem. Question which is very important is the future of the airlines. It's more probably that the medium haul will be in better situation like long haul lines. For the geographical areas, it's possible that it will be harder in Europe than in Asia. And for passengers and freight, the freight will not decrease, but how to carry the freight if there is no cargo? It's there on the passengers' flights, so it will be a big problem. For the tourist flows, inflection is to say maybe only European tourism in Europe, American tourism only for the United States. Is for the years will we know about 2 or 3 years after? A big question we cannot answer. About the planes, it's a big problem because we think that the big planes will not be used. For instance, the A380, the Boeing 747, the A3400, and so on. And the smaller plane will be used. There is a lot of scenarios. We'll present only 3 scenarios. Very optimistic scenario. You see, it's a V. So it's to say that 1 year after, there will be the same traffic. But nobody knows, but nobody believes that it will be possible. For another scenario, we see that it's L scenario. It decreases, and after you have a new crisis, new growth, but under the expected growth before the crisis. We can also a very pessimistic scenario, a return of a pandemic. And you see it's W, but we made only a W, it can be a double W with a return of the pandemic or new pandemic or other factors. It will be very pessimistic, but maybe it will happen. What to expect about the industry? For the industry, it's very different from the airlines. Oligopoly will not be challenged. Oligopoly, there is a duopoly, or mainly Boeing and Airbus. They will not be challenged. The 3 or 4 engine manufacturers, they will not be challenged. The big system producer like Thales will not be challenged, but under the contractors, they maybe will disappear. It's a big problem for the manufacturer because they needed these subcontractors. The question for the 2 members of the oligopoly are not very similar because Boeing had a big problem with the Boeing 737 MAX. They have to pay a lot of penalties. They have also a range which is not the same than Airbus. If the Boeing 737 MAX is not authorized to fly again, they need to invest to have a new medium old planes. For Airbus, the question is different. They are in best situation. Example, that Boeing don't want now to buy Embraer like it was expected. There will be some problem, a low problem with this no buying Embraer. For Airbus, they bought Bombardier, and is not a problem. So maybe the situation in the oligopoly, the duopoly, will be in favor of Airbus. To conclude, in the long term, we have to say again what we know very few things. We are to be very prudent, lot of humility, radical uncertainty. What about macroeconomic, geopolitical, health situation all over the world in the 25, in the 30 of the century? We don't know. So be very prudent is very important. Thank you very much.
This video is not ended. Please let your questions or remarks in comments. We will be glad to answer them. Subscribe, like and share to help us making this channel well known. See you soon!